Howard Levitt and I met years ago when I was a CBC News reporter covering a legal case involving a young woman who believed she'd been unfairly let go from her job. Howard was the employment law expert on that story. Today, he's a true heavyweight in the field, the most trusted and best workplace lawyer in the country, advising senior executives in major companies across Canada. Recently, we were catching up and had one of those, why hasn't anyone done this yet moments. We realized there was a real gap in the Canadian media landscape. No one was breaking down employment law in a way people could actually access and understand. So we're teaming up. This podcast is where we talk about workplace law, what's changing, what matters, and what you really need to know. I'm Stephanie Matisse with At Work with Howard Levitt. You probably know Howard's popular columns in the Financial Post. This is the companion piece where we dig deeper and offer you practical takeaways and unforgettable stories. Today, we're starting with the basics. Howard, the Canadian job market was really volatile last year, and a lot of people lost jobs. You're at the front lines. What's that like?
I've been doing this now for 47 years. When I started, wrongful dismissal almost didn't exist. Anyone who thought of suing their employer would be unemployable forever. Since then, employment law has burgeoned, it's flourished, it's exploded across the country. It's dramatically changed. So every year there's more regulations on employment law than any other field. For 40 years now, I've written a textbook and written a law report covering every single case across Canada. I keep up with every case that goes on in this country, so I know every legal possible wrinkle. And I can identify a case from 25 years ago from last month that's right on point and that maximizes what the person can get or maximize the defense an employer might put forward.
What drives you about this? Why are you still doing this?
I can focus on the strategy, I can focus on the people, I can focus on the excitement. Every case is a narrative, a story, human interest.
I think a lot of people have questions around the term just cause, meaning a cause for dismissal. How do you explain that?
It does not mean a good reason. Just cause means the behavior has been so horrendous that this employee simply does not deserve a penny. But if you're just a crappy employee, or if you're late to work or absent or insubordinate or disobedient, that's not just cause. Just cause is serious repudiation of the entire employment relationship, usually after warnings. And 10 warnings doesn't make just cause. It's also got to be substantively really bad behavior, willful bad behavior.
There's another term that sounds like an oxymoron, constructive dismissal. What is constructive dismissal?
It means a termination without being fired. And that could be because your salary's been cut, you've been treated abysmally. That's what people generally talk about, the poison work environment, or the court says no employee should have to live in those conditions. They're allowed to walk out the door and resign just as if they've been fired, a constructive firing. Or you've been demoted, or you've been humiliated in the workplace, but something where the court says it's no longer tenable for you to continue, and therefore you have the option of resigning and suing as if you've been fired because you've constructively been fired. That's what it means.
Is there an example that comes to mind, a story?
I do them every day. I can give 10 examples from the last week or more. If a person was, let's take Larry Doran, Ontario Power Generation, a case I did years ago. He had his salary cut, and everybody had their salary cut. And all the other executives at Ontario Power Generation accepted that. And he's the only one who didn't. He was a lone soldier who said, no, I'm not taking this. So he sued in their defense. It was everybody else accepted it. Larry should accept it too. And of course, it doesn't quite work that way. He had a salary cut, he had other conditions changed. He had a right to walk out the door and say, I'm not staying here anymore. And the court awarded him 24 months pay. And 24 months pay, by the way, doesn't mean 24 months salary. He was a senior executive at OPG. It meant 24 months of everything he would have got if he'd worked for 24 more months. Bonuses, LTIPs, everything.
And constructive dismissal involves things like demotions, salary slashes.
And poor treatment are the fundamental ones. Anything where a court says no employee should have to put up with that anymore. Then the court says, okay, you can resign and leave, but you better do that quickly. because you've been constructively dismissed and you stick around a little bit longer, the court will say you've condoned it, you've forgiven it, you've accepted it, and then it's too late. You can't wait and then decide, I'm not happy anymore, I'm going to leave, when the constructive dismissal happened months earlier. You've got to act when you have the chance legally, or it's too late later on.
Do people come and consult with you about that? Because it doesn't seem like it would be an easy decision to make or a clear-cut one to see if you're in the employee position.
It is very important to come and consult with me about that, because people are subjective creatures. And you may think that your situation is abysmal and horrendous, and of course people live in echo chambers where they talk to their friends who reinforce what they think, and it's too much of a pain in the ass, frankly, to tell them otherwise. So yeah, you're right, it's horrible. And then they get reinforced that it's horrible, and I'll come and say to them, it's not that horrible. I see worse every day, or enough of the time. This is not bad enough for a court to call it a constructive dismissal. For example, your salary's cut 5%, that's not a constructive dismissal. So give your head a shake. You got a bad boss. They're a miserable son of a bitch. Fair enough. I get it. I agree with you from what you've told me, from your side of the story. But it's not so off the charts as to be a constructive dismissal. And that's the other thing. I try and reality test. I've heard your side of the story. I haven't heard their side of the story. I'm always a little hesitant to jump or to let my clients jump until I've heard that. So what I might say is, let me write a letter to the company complaining about things, seeing if they'll remediate, which a court will be much happier if you try and do first. And they may say, this isn't true at all, or these parts of it aren't true, or here's the reason for this. And it might be quite rational. And then I say to the client, you don't want to quit your job because you're likely to lose on these set of facts. And the problem with constructive dismissal is you have to resign, and to get damaged, you have to be unemployed for a period of time. So you better damn well be right before you resign and quit and claim constructive dismissal. So I try and reality test with my clients, and at least half the time I talk them out of it.
What's the guidance around how you need to prove it?
Well, that's a very important question, where the rubber hits the road. Because at the end of the day, I say to the employee, okay, what evidence do you have? What emails? Well, gather them now while you're still there. Let's start with that. But secondly, if it's something that's interpersonal and it's not documented, what are the other witnesses going to say? Oh, they'll support me. Are you sure about that? You're suing their employer because they work there too. So how many of them are going to sit there and testify against their own employer? Now, you may be very lucky that by the time it gets to trial, a lot of those people will be gone and won't have any loyalty to the employer. Or if the employer is smart, they'll get witness statements now. I do that for my corporate clients. I make sure it's pinned down, knowing that employees may not be there by the time a case reaches trial. So I get witness statements on the spot to protect myself. But back to your question, I have a real gut check with the employee and say, what are the witnesses going to say? If it's that kind of a case, if it's a salary cut, if it's a cut in reporting structure, those you don't need any explanation. It's obvious. But if it's something where I'm being treated rudely, I'm being treated callously, and there's nothing in writing, he disses me, he doesn't give me a chance, or she doesn't give me she treats me abysmally and looks down on me. I mean, okay, what's your evidence?
That will resonate with a lot of people who hear this, because a lot of people are having that experience and they want to know, how do I show that in a legal sense so I can do something about it?
I've seen every case, so I've seen every angle and how you prove things. So it would depend on the case, but I'll come up with something imaginative most of the time. I think all of the time. Sometimes it's hard to convince employee clients to let go of their rage and look at it with the reality of what evidence is going to look like and what evidence they will have, and how it's objective evidence, not subjective emotion, that's going to determine the case. They'll have their story. The other side will have their story. I want to find out what that other side's story is. I usually can predict it. Just from meeting the employee, I can usually predict what the other side's story is going to be. And then somebody said, gee, that's just what they said. I said, well, yeah, I have done this a few times.
I bet people really want to know how much money one can get when they are fired.
Well, that depends who you are. If you're a minimum wage worker and you get 2 years' pay, it's still $60,000. It's not millions of dollars, and that's assuming you get 2 years' pay. Not many minimum wage workers are ever going to get 2 years' pay, because there's seen to be people who can get jobs quickly. If you're a CEO, A, you're paid more to begin with, so 2 years' pay is worth a lot more. 2, it's harder to get reemployed at the same level, so you're more likely to get 2 years' pay. You're probably likely to be older, which gets you more pay. The higher you are in the hierarchy, the more money you're going to get. You don't just get salary, and people forget that. You get the value of your benefits. Whatever the company paid to get those benefits, you get the company cost. You get your bonuses based on what you reasonably would have got over the notice period, largely based on what you've been receiving more recently. You get stock options, LTIPs, commissions, whatever you would have earned over that period of time. And sometimes that's worth a lot more than just the salary itself. Let me give you an example. One thing that's often worth a lot more, you're in a defined benefit plan, pension plan, and you're not quite 60, haven't quite reached that magic number of 90 combined age and length of service to get the vested pension for life. You're a year and a half away. That's worth a lot more than a year and a half severance salary or a year and a half of compensation. The court will give you that. The court will treat you, if you're entitled to 18 months' notice, as if you'd worked 18 more months and therefore you'd qualify for the pension, even though you didn't. That could be worth millions of dollars by itself. And it's overlooked by employees and some lawyers. They don't even think about it. You get actuarial evidence, what's the value of that pension if you worked 18 months, 24 months, 21 months. The court has all that in front of them and making their decisions as to how much money to award.
I think a lot of people would be intimidated by, I don't know, what they imagine to be the process or the cost. What do you want to say to them?
Well, they first of all find out what the cost is in the first meeting. But I'm going to be straight with them. So we assess it quickly. And if the case doesn't have any value, we'll tell them that. Don't waste your money. If the case has value, a lawyer's assigned to it, which will make sure there's value at the end. The vast majority of money goes to the client, not to us.
That's it for today with At Work with Howard Levitt. If you want to meet Howard and his team, the best place to start is at levittllp.com. You'll find all kinds of information, including how to request a consultation. I'm Stephanie Matisse. Thanks for listening.